So guys, as promised, I've gotten to level 50, I've maxed my power level, and I'm going to get into more detail about the build that I've did a video on earlier. Let's take a quick look at the attributes. I've managed to get 20 in Warfare, basically just to get that 5% crit. I've also kept 10 in Toughness for the 30 HP regen per second. In Virtue, I'm just not concerned about. I don't really have much care about any of those attributes. They would be nice, maybe later on in the game when they release more attribute per character, then I would go for them, but that's that. To have a quick look at the stats, I've got 5,500 health, nearly 6,000 suppression. The reason I've got such high suppression is, as everyone knows, in melee, if your suppression goes into yellow or red, you're just susceptible to CC, so you just get knocked down and basically chain stunned until you die because you can't even get out of combat to heal. I've got 30% deflect due to this skill where damage bonus percent equal to your deflect chance. So I've got 30% extra damage, well 29 but 30. Even though the 30% deflect chance is just fantastic, as I mentioned in the other video, that every deflect basically is 0 damage, so you've got 30% to take 0 damage from every attack. I've got 25% damage reduction, 11 physical resist, heat resist, warp resist. Warp seems to be the most important for me, just basically because it's AoE and quite a lot of the Psychers have that channeled beam which can be done from ranged, which ticks, but I'll get more into that later. I've got a 41% base crit chance, but that will be slightly higher because I have on my gear 5% crit chance and 10% crit hit strength when enemies are slowed, and as we all know, the bleeds also slow enemies, so I will permanently have that 5% crit and 10% crit hit strength active. I've then also got the bonus melee, which is obviously what you want, bonus physical because all my attacks are physical. I've got 40 HP regen per second. I did in the previous video use this perk, which gave me, have a look, 80 regen per second, but as I'm going to show you with using this axe where each kill and blow heals me to the amount of the damage dealt, I don't really need as much HP regen, so I kind of traded it off for this, which gives me 10% crit hit chance and minus 10% maximum HP. But I will show you why we're focusing on crit now on this build. In the crit tree, we've got this Berserker Rage where every critical hit will deal 1% of max HP. And because I've got around 40% crit on everything, just flat 40% crit on every ability I do, and I believe this charge has an extra 10% crit chance, if you see right there on the right hand side of the screen. Nothing else has bonus crit chance, but that has, so that'll have a 50% chance to be a crit, and it hits really hard, this charge ability. It's called Execute. I wish it was called Charge because a lot of people get confused between Execution and Execute. We also have every attack increased the critical chance by 1%, and it resets when you crit, so I have even higher chance to crit when I'm not critting. Then I've just picked up all the crit skills. Basically, I've not gone down here to get the 10% bonus damage up to 100% for 10 seconds because I'm not a big fan of any kind of perk which procs on a kill and blow. Like, the majority of the time, some of the enemies will die for a dot tick, and it's not guaranteed that I will get the damage from that. I've got 1 point here in Warp Phone, which is basically a placeholder point for the amount of skill points we've got right now. In the future, when this tree is unlocked, well, this part of the tree, I'll most likely go for Holy Conclave. depending on if I'm grouped with other players that have it, because it stacks. Or if not, I would possibly go for this if it's a demon based mission like the Unholy Conclave, which is just pure demons. If I had to pick another one, I would maybe go for this, which gives me 20% warp resistance and 5% damage. It doesn't stack, so this possibly would be picked by a lot of players that aren't psychers, just due to the health and damage. So if I'm in a party, that right there will be more beneficial than this. I've stayed with everything in the hit points. I did try taking out some points from the enhanced organs and some suppression and hit points, but the 10% HP from this really negates the 10% HP lost here, so I'm not really suffering in that much of HP loss. The damage over time, really self-explanatory. Bleeding enemies are also slowed. Single target, as someone mentioned on my other video, why did I not take this skill? I was basically level 41, 42 when I made the video on what I was intending to build. And now that I've got the skill points, the talents there, I've got the 20% damage to single target skills against slowed, shocked, stunned or frozen. As we know, the enemies are permanently going to be slowed because of the bleed, so free 20% damage. That 20% damage right there that I would have on every single enemy, I would much rather have than a chance of having that 10 to 100% damage, and it's only 10-second based. I mean, if I'm fighting a boss, I'm not really concerned about green, yellow mission. I mean, even red missions. I'm more leaning towards the build being prepared for Warzone, which is an endless game mode where I'm assuming because it's endless that enemies are going to be scaling higher and higher. So that only procs on a result of a kill, whereas this skill will permanently be active throughout every second of combat, basically. The close combat tree, as you can see, I've gone further down this route and taking the critical hits also provide a stacking vulnerability to the target. So the enemy will be taking increased damage throughout an entire fight, the longer that we're in a fight, dealing more crits with that high crit chance. All of these increase the damage when a target is slowed, shocked, stunned or frozen. As said again, the targets are going to permanently be slowed. Sometimes they'll be stunned from the execute / charge from the two-handed axe ability. I then decided to take this perk right here. Grants a stacking 5% bonus to melee skills up to 50% as long as there is less than 2 seconds between each melee attack. Basically, with having such high suppression and suppression regen and health sustainability from the crit heals, my axe, the main attack is 1.1 seconds cooldown, so I will be attacking every second basically. If I'm in between using these skills, I will always weave in a normal strike to keep that bonus active, and so I'm basically having 50% extra damage. They're just melee. I've got these two here. Basically, it's 7% damage either way if you're around a group of 3 enemies or if you're against one other enemy. And that's basically the build, guys. It's so strong. I'm gonna leave a little playthrough. I'm gonna do a turret mission on the hardest difficulty, which is impossible, and just gonna basically blitz through it. I think it takes around 2 minutes, so if you want to see a bit of gameplay, stay tuned. And yeah, another thing, someone also asked me, does this work for a one-handed axe? Yes, it does. I've got a one-handed axe here and a shield. Pardon the signums, they're just there for just a slot purpose. As you can see, deflect. So with using that skill where damage equal to deflect, I will have 57% damage. I've still got 30% crit, but the axe, I believe, has base plus 10% crit chance. So the crit chance is the same as the two-handed axe, but it will be applied on the actual single target attack. The skills are all the same. The single-handed axe applies a damage over time dot, so the bleed, it's single target skill. It's basically the whole build works for if you want to be wielding the two-handed, or if you've got friends who are playing like psychers and pure damage dealers and you want someone to be there in the front line and the two-handed, you're feeling a bit that you're taking a bit too much damage, then you can equip the shield and axe on your back bar and basically go to town because your stats are exactly the same. The only two items you would have to work on is getting 2 extra signums. But let's take a look at the gear. I've gone for basically getting crit on my gear and as much suppression regen as possible. I don't want any suppression regen in cover, any health regen in cover. I do not want to be leaving combat and going to cover. That is not what we're about in this build. We're about being in their face and making them bleed. Any kind of stats which are damage against slowed, because we're slowing targets, melee damage, tasty, HP a second, HP, I'll have all of that, damage against bleed enemies. There's just so many stats that you can double dip in, which is why this build is fantastic. I don't need to look for physical damage, I don't need to look for melee damage, I can just... It's pretty easy to gear for, basically. I've got Warfare, +2 there, that's basically what's needed to get the Warfare to 20, to get that extra 5% crit. 1% deflect, it double dips, it's given me 1% chance to take no damage from every enemy attack, and it's also given me 1% extra damage due to that perk. My armour, I like using the jetpack or assault jump, basically just to get into combat, and then it means I can use my charge if I want to change target from melee damage to a ranged damage dealer on the enemy side. I've got damage reduction, health, crit chance, suppression resistance per hit. That means every time I'm hitting something I'm getting suppression back. And just basically deflect chance. The less damage I'm taking, the more damage I'm able to stand and deal out, basically. Crit chance again. Your inoculator, I would strongly... Well, you basically need to have 2 red slots at least. You cannot have like double green, 1 red and 1 blue or whatever. You need to have 2 red. That is highly important because you need 1 for a heal. I've taken Blood Blom, which restores 20% HP a second for 20 seconds. And you also need Absorbent to give you 75% of max suppression. That's in case you are fighting a huge amount of enemies with huge AoE like rockets, grenades, and if you're taking channeled effects or warp damage, then your health will most likely be high. The problem with melee is suppression. That's the main concern. You need to treat suppression like a health bar, because if your suppression gets red and you don't have this like inoculator section, the absorbent, you'll heal your health up, but you'll not get your suppression back, and you'll just get chain stun, CC'd, because there's no diminishing returns on CC in this game just yet. Then I've got the extra inoculator pack capacity. I'm not concerned about a damage buff just yet. I probably could slot one in, but I quite like having my slots just so I can basically be in combat as much as I can. I don't feel I need the damage buff, as you'll see in the video later on when I'm plowing through an impossible tarot. My weapon, I really like the kill and blow heals on a mount equal to their thing. I know I mentioned earlier in the video I don't like anything that's a chance on kill and blow, but I feel this is the strongest trait on a great axe right now. The other one is after a kill you've got a 50% chance to stun a target. I don't want to stun a target, they're getting slowed, they're gonna die. I don't have time to stun targets. I would rather have that heal when I've killed somebody. It basically gives you a free inoculator use if you are in combat and there's a lot of regular enemies. You basically do a spin and blow and you're healed to max health, and from all the perks, as you can see in hit points, where's it? Every 10 HP healed, the character gains 1 suppression, so I'm also giving myself suppression back as well as health with this weapon trait. I haven't completely min-maxed, they're not max rolls, but I've got damage against bleeds, I've got the crit chance, the damage for strike, which is the single target ability, which is the main bread and butter of the build, to be honest, when you're fighting bosses, because the spin and blows just really to AoE the enemies that get spawned by bosses. Then you've got the execute, which is used for mobility, and also it does a decent amount of damage, so you'll basically be doing single target strikes, and then using an execute when it's off cooldown, and then a spin and blow when enemies spawn. I don't really use wide strike unless I'm walking towards enemies of like a group of 3, and instead of using a single like a strike 3 times, if this spin and blow's on cooldown, I'll wide strike, then execute charge to the next enemy, as you'll see. And that's basically the build. It's fantastic. It works for me. I don't feel like I'm in any kind of trouble when I'm doing these impossible tarots. I've done all different tarot setup scenarios, and it's just great fun jumping into a bunch of enemies and spinning and chopping them to bits. And hope you enjoy it. If you liked the video, I'd appreciate a like, a subscribe, and let me know how you feel. But here's a little bit of gameplay. Take it easy, guys. Method out. Thanks for tuning in.
Strategic targets located in the area. With a surgical strike, we can break their chain of command and harvest valuable data.
Your head on a spike. Die, human.
For the Emperor!
Target deletion complete. Eradicated. Mission status updated. Enemy combat efficiency at critical level. No further actions needed. The machine god is pleased. End of log.
For chaos.